Jasmine Parker adjusted the straps of her diaper bag with trembling fingers, looking down at Kai and Kaden, her 18-month-old twins, who stared up at her from their strollers with the carefree calm of children oblivious to adult crises. The message from the daycare had arrived shortly after dawn: emergency closure, employee with COVID. Sorry for the inconvenience. Inconvenience didn't even begin to describe it. Her shift at the Blackwood Estate started in an hour, and she knew from the stories whispered among the staff that Sebastian Blackwood did not tolerate personal problems. The man had fired a housekeeper for rearranging the books alphabetically instead of by height. Jasmine couldn't afford a single mistake. Not after the months of unemployment that followed Terrell's death in a construction accident. Not with the rent looming like a guillotine and the cans of formula running low. So she made a decision, born not of recklessness but of desperation. She dressed the boys, packed their snacks, and promised them an adventure. As the taxi approached the gates of the mansion in Pacific Palisades, a knot of guilt formed in her stomach. She wasn't just breaking the rules. She was gambling away the only stable ground left beneath her feet. By the time she entered the $15 million mansion, her hands were already damp with sweat. She moved quickly, pushing the double stroller toward the laundry room hidden behind the east hallway, a forgotten corner near the utility sinks and old shelves. The boys babbled and clapped their hands, amused by the echoes their voices made off the tiled walls. "Sure babies, shhh." Jasmine murmured, pressing a finger to Kaden's lips and fishing a soft toy out of the diaper bag. She crouched down beside them, brushing Kai's curls away from his forehead. "Mommy has to work, okay? Just for a few hours," she whispered more to herself than to them. Then she left them there, baby gates installed at the entrance, cartoons playing on her phone propped up against a bottle of detergent. She began her routine with surgical precision, airing out the cushions in the living room, dusting the banister, scrubbing the floors without leaving a single smudge. She was focused, almost robotic, her ears tuned like antennas to the slightest noises. Every few minutes, she would peek out, sigh with relief at their giggles, and resume her tasks. She thought she was succeeding until she heard the unmistakable creak of the front door. Sebastian Blackwood didn't come home early. That was the rule. He worked 16-hour days, often disappeared on business trips, and valued distance more than conversation. So when Jasmine heard the sharp click of Italian leather shoes crossing the hall, her stomach dropped. She turned the corner just in time to see him walking toward the living room, briefcase in hand, jaw tense in his usual somber line. And beyond him, the unmistakable sound of something jingling. Not mechanical, not architectural, something playful. "Oh no," she whispered, springing into motion. But it was too late. Sebastian had reached the living room, and the scene had already unfolded before him. There, in the middle of the expansive marble floor, were Kai and Kaden, surrounded by a chaos of pot lids and plastic containers. The babies were screaming with joy, banging on upturned bowls like drum kits, clapping and laughing as if the cold floor were a concert stage. Sebastian stopped dead. His eyes, sharp as cut glass, widened, not with surprise, but with a kind of confusion that quickly turned to fury. Jasmine reached the archway just as he turned his head. Their eyes met. Hers screamed, "Please don't do this," while his said nothing, only silence and steel. Sebastian opened his mouth, a sharp breath, the beginning of what she knew would be a dismissal. But then something happened. Kai, curious as ever, dropped his makeshift drumstick and crawled toward the imposing man in the suit. The marble was slippery beneath his knees, but the boy pressed forward with unwavering determination. Sebastian blinked, stunned, as the child reached him, sat down on his chubby legs, and raised his arms. "Dada." The word came out soft and drawn out, little more than a syllable, but it froze the room. Jasmine's heart stopped. She watched, horrified, expecting Sebastian to recoil or explode. But instead he laughed, a real laugh, not polite or measured, but involuntary and almost confused, as if the sound itself had surprised him. He crouched down, slow and cautious, and let the boy grab his index finger. Sebastian's expression changed. Something tender flickered behind his eyes. Something that looked dangerously like a memory. For a man who had built empires on logic, the moment defied explanation. Jasmine clung to the wall behind her for balance, watching a man she had feared unravel in front of a child who had no idea who he was. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was intimate. Jasmine wanted to say something, anything to explain, to apologize, but the words died in her throat. Sebastian remained crouched, his attention now divided between Kai and Kaden, who had approached, offering him a dented pot lid as a gift. Sebastian accepted it with both hands, as if handling something sacred. "Which one said that?" he asked calmly, looking at Jasmine without breaking eye contact with the boy. "Kai," she replied, her voice small. "I'm sorry. The daycare." "You didn't think to tell me," he interrupted, though his tone wasn't cruel. "I didn't want to lose my job. I just didn't have a choice." Her voice cracked then, sharp with guilt. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he let Kaden climb onto his lap and babble meaningless sounds while Kai leaned on his shoulder. The sacred trust of babies, nestling into him without fear. Sebastian blinked slowly, his arms circling them in what began as hesitation and turned into instinct. "They're not a problem," he said. 3 words, simple and strange, but when Jasmine heard them, her knees nearly buckled. Jasmine didn't move. Her feet were rooted, her brain struggling to keep up with her heart. The man in front of her, who had once terrorized the staff with his cold stares and silent dismissals, was now balancing 2 laughing babies on his lap and smiling, not out of politeness or embarrassment, but with something that looked like contentment. She watched him whisper something to Kai, who laughed in response, and for the first time saw warmth in Sebastian Blackwood's eyes. Real warmth. There was something there. Not pity, not charity, but presence, connection. Jasmine felt her breath catch in her chest, and for a split second, the weight she had been carrying for months lifted. Terrell's absence, the overdue bills, the fear of eviction, all took a step back as she stood in the doorway of a mansion she thought would never fully welcome her. She had walked in that morning expecting to scrub floors in silence and hide her children like a secret. But now she was watching something she didn't understand, yet couldn't look away from. And the strangest part, Sebastian didn't seem to want to look away either. Her children's laughter filled the mansion as if it belonged there, ricocheting off walls that had never heard joy. And Sebastian remained exactly where he was, letting them explore his face, pull on his tie, and babble as if he had always been part of their world. Jasmine didn't dare break the spell, not yet. Her apology hung in the air, unfinished and now unnecessary. What she had expected to be a catastrophe had turned into something completely different, something she had no name for. She didn't trust it. Not yet. But she didn't run away either. Sebastian looked at her once more, still holding the 2 boys as if they were made of glass and stardust. And then it happened again. Kai looked up, eyes wide and joyful, and repeated the word more clearly this time. "Dada." Sebastian didn't laugh this time. He just closed his eyes, took a breath, and let the word land where it would. And Jasmine, her heart pounding, stood still and wide-eyed, watching the impossible unfold. The changes came without announcements or explanations. No notes stuck to the refrigerator, no awkward conversations with management phrasing, just small changes in rhythm. Subtle at first, then unmistakable. Sebastian began postponing his meetings. Calls that once began at sunrise were delayed until noon. Memoranda were answered from home instead of the office in the corner that crowned a Manhattan tower. Jasmine didn't notice at first, distracted by the constant demands of the twins and the unspoken pressure of working in a house where everything had to remain perfect. But then she began to hear footsteps during the day, his footsteps moving through the hallways when she used to think the house was hers alone. He never interrupted. Sometimes he would pause in a doorway, watching without speaking. Other times he would pass by, waving slightly and greeting her, his eyes tired but not hostile. His once imposing presence became something she anticipated not with dread, but with curiosity. The man who used to disappear like a ghost now haunted her in a different way, not cold, just present. And that alone seemed like the beginning of something neither of them had words to describe. The first time she noticed the real change, she was folding towels in the laundry room. It was early, just after the twins had taken their morning nap. She had always filled the silence by humming, mostly out of habit, though sometimes just to keep her emotions from slipping out of control. That day, it was an old lullaby her grandmother used to sing. Low and sweet, a melody worn like old fabric. Her hands moved mechanically, keeping time with her voice as she stacked neatly folded towels in the closet. She didn't hear him approach, but something changed in the air, a kind of silence that wasn't empty. When she turned, Sebastian was leaning against the doorframe, arms loosely crossed, his expression unreadable. She froze in the middle of the verse, caught between apology and embarrassment. But he didn't move, didn't smile dismissively, didn't comment. His eyes were half closed, as if he had been listening, really listening, and couldn't tear himself away. "What song is that?" he asked after a moment. His voice was low, unguarded. Jasmine hesitated before answering. "Just something my grandmother used to sing. It helps me think." He nodded once, then turned away, but not before saying, "You should keep singing." That night, the twins woke up crying. It wasn't unusual when they were teething, both of them, and sleep came in short, restless bursts. Jasmine shuffled to the kitchen in slippers and a robe, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. She moved with the familiarity of exhaustion, pouring milk into bottles and warming them on the stove with one hand while rocking Kaden on her shoulder. Kai had gone back to sleep after a few soothing murmurs, but Kaden had a stubborn streak. She rocked him slowly, singing that same lullaby softly while the bottle warmed. And then she heard footsteps again, softer this time, measured. When she turned, Sebastian was there, standing awkwardly in the kitchen doorway as if unsure whether to come in or leave. She said nothing, and neither did he at first, but then without asking, he took a step forward and gestured toward the second chair at the small kitchen table. "Do you mind?" he asked, his voice low. She shook her head, surprised. He sat down anyway. No performance, no reason. Just a man sitting next to her in the middle of the night while she warmed milk for a crying baby. The silence between them was strangely comfortable. It wasn't like the silences they had shared before. Those had been tense, expectant, filled with the fear of making a wrong move. This one felt different. She handed him a clean burp cloth and said nothing. He took it without question. Kaden, now calm, nestled into her chest with the warm bottle, his eyes fluttering to close. Sebastian watched carefully, as if the mechanics of love were something he had never studied closely. "How long since?" He left the question hanging, not finishing it completely. Jasmine looked at him. 4 months. Construction accident. He was coming home from work. I was making dinner. She swallowed, forcing the memory back where it belonged. Sebastian didn't respond with platitudes. He didn't offer hollow sympathy. He just nodded slowly, as if the weight of her loss had landed on his chest too. "I was engaged once," he said after a while. "Years ago. She left. Said I wasn't made for love." The way he said it wasn't bitter, just factual, like a scar he had learned to stop touching. Jasmine didn't press. She just kept rocking Kaden, the warmth of the bottle mingling with the soft cadence of his breathing. What passed between them wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. There was no grand confession or tearful breakdown, just two people sitting side by side in the silence of a mansion that until recently had only echoed with silence. He didn't touch her, didn't lean in, but listened with the full presence of someone who rarely gave his attention freely. And Jasmine, who had spent so much time keeping her pain tucked away in tight corners of her chest, found herself speaking in complete sentences for the first time in days. She told him about Terrell, how they met in college, how he made her laugh during final exams, how he once drove 4 hours just to bring her soup when she was sick. Sebastian listened as if he cared. As if every word she spoke filled a space he hadn't realized was empty. She didn't cry. He didn't comfort her. But something changed again. The kind of change you only notice later, when you realize you've started breathing differently without knowing why. It started with something simple, a cleaning task, no different from the others Jasmine had done countless times since her first day at the mansion. She was in the main office, cleaning the heavy oak desk Sebastian rarely used, straightening pens he never touched, aligning books he never read. She had done this a dozen times before, each time with the same quiet detachment, but today her cloth caught slightly on the edge of the desk, revealing a drawer that had not been pushed in completely. A small silver key still protruded from the lock, as if someone had turned it halfway and forgotten to finish. She hesitated. Curiosity was not part of her job. But there was something about the drawer being ajar, unintentional, vulnerable, that made her pause. Carefully, she slid it open just enough to see what was inside. Only one item rested there. A single photograph with folded corners. It showed Sebastian years younger, his face less guarded, his smile less forced. He had his arm firmly around a woman, blonde, eyes full of light, whose smile was radiant and somehow unbearably tragic. On the back, written in faded black ink, was a name, Catherine. Jasmine didn't linger. She placed the photo exactly as she had found it, closed the drawer, and walked away. But all afternoon her thoughts kept returning to the image. That version of Sebastian, smiling, open, human, haunted her. She hadn't known him long, but she had seen the layers, the guarded silences, the restraint he wore like armor. That photo didn't match the man who walked the halls like a shadow. That man had buried something, perhaps more than one thing. As she chopped vegetables in the kitchen later that day, trying to get the image out of her head, she heard footsteps, familiar now. Not alarming, just present. She didn't turn immediately, assuming he would pass by as usual, but he didn't. He stopped beside her, too close to be casual. She looked up, surprised by the stillness in his expression. "You saw it," he said calmly, his voice hoarse. No anger, just confirmation, not a question. Jasmine hesitated, then gave a small nod. She didn't offer an apology. She didn't lie. And he didn't accuse her. He simply leaned against the counter as if the act of standing had become too heavy. "I forgot the drawer wasn't locked," he said after a long silence. No one had opened it in years. His hands were clenched at his sides, not in anger, but in the kind of restraint that came from deep emotional control. "Her name was Catherine," he continued, as if the photograph hadn't already told him. "She was my fiancée." Jasmine waited, not pressing, not prodding, just letting him talk. "The night my mother died, she went out. I called her from the hospital, told her I needed her. She didn't come. I came home that night and found her bags gone." His voice cracked at the edge, just enough to make her chest tighten. "She said she couldn't be with someone who was broken, that the pain was too heavy for her." He didn't look at Jasmine as he spoke. His eyes were elsewhere, back in time, caught between memory and wound. "Since then, I haven't let anyone in. Not really. Not because I don't want to, but because I don't trust anyone to stay." It wasn't a confession. It was an exposed scar. Jasmine didn't respond immediately. What could she say to undo that kind of pain? Still, she felt her fingers twitch with the urge to reach out, not to fix him, not to promise anything, but just to say, "I hear you." She didn't, though. She wasn't ready for that, and maybe he wasn't either. Instead, she listened the way he had listened to her in the kitchen nights before. "The boys," Sebastian continued after a pause, "don't know any of this. They just smile, laugh, climb on top of me as if I'm not this." He shook his head. "As if I'm not hollow." Jasmine approached him, her voice low but firm. "You're not hollow. You're hurt." He finally met her gaze, and the expression in his eyes, vulnerable, stripped of all that careful detachment, almost broke her. "I don't know what to do with this feeling," he admitted. With you." Her breath caught. "You don't have to do anything," she said gently. "Just keep showing up." He gave a slight nod, then stepped away from the counter, retreating without another word. But the air between them was different now. Changed. He had spoken his truth, and she had stayed. That night, Jasmine couldn't sleep. The twins, blissfully unaware of the emotional earthquakes around them, slept peacefully in their cribs. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Sebastian's voice echo in her mind. "Since then, I haven't let anyone in." She thought about how easily Kai had climbed onto his lap, how Kaden had smiled at him as if he had been born knowing he could trust this man. Children didn't analyze or hesitate. They simply felt. And somehow they had felt something in Sebastian that was worth believing in. Jasmine didn't know if she was falling in love with him. That word seemed too big, too dangerous. But she knew this, she saw him. And he was trying. And in a world that had broken them both in different ways, effort mattered. The dinner party wasn't just a social gathering. It was a performance. Investors, media whisperers, elite West Coast venture donors, and venture capitalists with strong opinions about the future of AI filled the mansion with a kind of sterile laughter Sebastian detested. He played the role of host with mechanical charm, pouring wine he didn't drink and nodding along to predictions he didn't agree with. Jasmine, dressed in soft navy blue and quiet grace, moved through the background as she always did, invisible to most but not to Victoria Sterling. She spotted her within minutes. No diamonds, no careful accent, just a woman with 2 children and no armor. Victoria waited for her moment. When Jasmine passed the butler's pantry, carrying a tray of delicate glasses, Victoria slipped behind her like a shadow with teeth. "So," she said, as smooth as the champagne in her hand, You're the one everyone's been whispering about. Jasmine turned, surprised but composed. Excuse me. Victoria smiled without warmth. Sebastian's charity project. The one with baggage. Jasmine's breath caught. You don't know me. Victoria's voice dropped, cutting off any pretense. No, dear, but I know him. And he always breaks the toys he thinks he can fix. You're not even porcelain. You're a phase. Jasmine didn't respond. She couldn't, not with anything that didn't sound defensive or worse, fragile. Instead, she walked past Victoria and placed the tray where it belonged. Her hands were steady, but her insides were shaking. The words hit harder than she expected. Not because she believed them, but because somewhere in the dusty corners of her doubt, whispers echoed that she had tried so hard to silence within herself. You don't belong here. You're temporary. He'll remember who he is and who you're not. Sebastian noticed. He always noticed her now. Across the room, his eyes tracked the change, the way her shoulders slumped inward, how her voice softened. It wasn't just fatigue. It was something else. He excused himself from a conversation about market volatility and crossed the room without hesitation. Jasmine, he said when he reached her near the side hallway. She turned, surprised. Yes. His brow furrowed. What happened? She shook her head too quickly. Nothing. I'm just tired. It's been a long day. But her eyes told a different story. Sebastian's jaw tightened. He walked away before she could protest, already knowing where to go. He found Victoria leaning against the marble island in the kitchen, swirling her wine as if she owned the place. You talked to her, he said bluntly. Victoria didn't flinch. I talked to a lot of people. Don't play games with me, Victoria. He stepped closer. I know what you do when you feel you're not in control. You find someone weaker and twist the knife. She tilted her head. All elegance and venom. You think I see her as a threat? Please. You should, he snapped. She has more strength in her silence than you ever had in your performance. Victoria's smile faltered for half a second. Then, as always, she recovered. Do you really believe this nanny act is real? That she's not just playing house? Sebastian leaned in. If she is, she's doing a better job of it than you ever could. Victoria's mask cracked for just a moment. Then coldly, she said, You're emotional. That's new for you. He stepped back, calmer now, colder. Go away, Victoria. Enjoy the party, but leave my life out of your theater. She said nothing, but the ice in her gaze made it clear that this was not over. It started with something small, a murmur in the hallway, the kind of whisper that slips between closed doors and leaves a mark even when it has no shape. His grandfather's silver pocket watch was gone from the glass display case in the office. No broken lock, no cracked hinge, just gone. At first, Sebastian assumed it had been moved for cleaning. He asked casually. No one admitted to touching it. Then Victoria, gentle as ever, made a casual comment to one of the kitchen staff. Strange, isn't it? Things only started disappearing after the boys showed up. Or maybe their mother needs help paying the bills. It wasn't a direct accusation. Victoria was too smart for that. But the effect was immediate. The words spread like oil through the silent machinery of the mansion. Suddenly, glances lingered on Jasmine. Voices fell when she entered the room. Sebastian didn't notice at first. He was too busy, too distracted, too unaware of how loud silence can be when it's directed at someone who has no armor. But Jasmine felt it. She felt it in the way the house stopped being a home and became something else, a place where she didn't know who to trust. Jasmine tried to ignore it. She focused on the twins, on her tasks, on keeping the routine stable. But routine cannot withstand suspicion. One afternoon, returning from changing Kaden's diaper, she found her locker broken into in the staff quarters, clothes scattered everywhere. Her wallet was emptied and left face up. A crumpled photo of her late husband, the only copy she had, was torn at the edge. She stood there for a long time, staring at the mess, as if it could reorganize itself and undo what it had done. When she reported it to the team leader, the response was, "We're looking into it." No apology, no assurance, just sterile distance. Later that day, she was called aside by Mr. Morrison, the manager of Sebastian's property. He didn't look her in the eye. "Ms. Parker, given the current situation, we think it best that you take some time off until things are resolved." The words didn't surprise her. Not after the closet, not after the looks. Still, they hit deep. She packed slowly. The boys were confused. Kai asked about Mr. Seb 3 times while Jasmine folded her clothes. Kaden clung to her leg. She kept her expression steady even as her hands trembled. She wouldn't cry. Not in this house, not in front of them. She left a note on the refrigerator, not for closure, but for clarity. It read, "I didn't take it, but I understand why no one believes me." She secured it with a strawberry-shaped magnet, one that Kai loved to pull off every morning. Then she gathered the boys and left through the side entrance without telling anyone. She didn't want goodbyes. She didn't want another hollow explanation about protocols or reputation or discretion. Sebastian wasn't home when she left. Maybe that made it easier. Or maybe not. The taxi she called took forever to arrive. She sat on the stone bench near the gate, Kaden sleeping on her shoulder, Kai pulling at a loose thread on her sleeve. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence between them was heavy with what she couldn't say. That the world often didn't need proof to punish people like her. That being close to something beautiful didn't make her belong. That trust, once broken, wasn't easily repaired. She told herself she would find another job, another place. But the truth was that she had begun to believe in something there. And now she wasn't sure if that belief had been her mistake. When Sebastian returned that night, he noticed it immediately. The sound, or lack thereof. No soft thud of feet, no cooing from the nursery monitor, no hum from the kitchen. The house felt wrong, not empty, just out of place. He walked through the living room and saw the untouched toy basket. A forgotten cup on the side table. The light on the baby monitor flashed but transmitted nothing. He called once, then twice. No answer. Morrison emerged from the hallway, stiff. "She's gone," he said. "She took the boys and left this afternoon." Sebastian's chest tightened. "Why?" Morrison hesitated. There was a situation. The watch was missing. Tensions rose. "We thought it best if she—" "Who is we?" Sebastian's voice was razor-sharp now. "Who gave the order?" Morrison shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't an order, just a suggestion. Sebastian didn't speak again. He turned and walked into the kitchen, his heart pounding. The silence was oppressive, and the walls seemed smaller. Then he saw it, the note, still stuck under the strawberry magnet. He pulled it free, his eyes scanning the short sentence once, then again. Each word landed like a stone in his stomach. He sat down at the counter, the paper still in his hand. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, clean, slanted slightly to the right, the ink darker where she had pressed harder. "I didn't take it, but I understand why no one believes me." Simple. Devastating. It wasn't just a denial. It was surrender. And that tore him up more than any confession ever could. He thought of Kai calling him, of Kaden reaching for his finger, of Jasmine humming in the laundry room, folding towels as if it were an act of grace. He remembered how she never asked for anything, never demanded space, never used her pain as a shield. And he had allowed her to be cast out as if she were disposable. His hands tightened around the note. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was failure. His. It was Morrison who found the watch. Sebastian didn't even react when the property manager entered his office, silver glint in his hand. "We found it," he said calmly, placing the object on the edge of the desk as if it might break. Under a loose board in the north hallway. It must have fallen out of the child's pocket. Sebastian's eyes rose. Which hallway? Near the piano room. There was a loose panel. It must have slipped out. Morrison cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "It wasn't anyone's fault, sir. I believe the child had it in his hand. He crawled there, perhaps." Sebastian picked up the watch slowly, his fingers brushing its surface as if it might burn him. "The child," he repeated, his voice hoarse. "Kai," Morrison gave a small nod. "Yes, sir." Sebastian didn't thank him. He didn't reprimand him either. He stood up, picked up the watch, and left without another word. For the first time in years, he walked away from business obligations and didn't look back. With every mile he drove toward Jasmine's neighborhood, his grip on the steering wheel tightened, not with anger, but with regret. Deep, cutting regret. He hadn't just failed to defend her. He had believed the worst. Even for a moment, even with hesitation, it was enough to break something sacred. The apartment building was modest, old brick and rusted railings. It didn't matter. It was hers. He climbed the steps without knocking, holding the watch in his palm like an offering of peace. He rehearsed what to say and realized too late that no words would suffice. When the door opened, Jasmine's face appeared first, tired, cautious. Then he saw Kaden curled up against her chest, his small body feverish and flushed. Sebastian didn't speak immediately. He couldn't. The words in his throat weren't strong enough to face the moment. Instead, he held out the watch. No preamble, no dramatic apology. Just truth, just action. "Go home," he said quietly, his voice thinner than he intended. Jasmine's eyes flicked from the watch to his face. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. What she said was worse. "You believed I could do that," she whispered, her voice low, hoarse. "That's what hurt the most." Sebastian's lips parted, but nothing came out. What excuse could absolve this? What explanation would matter now? He didn't try to offer one. Instead, he walked slowly inside, took off his coat, and sat down on the floor next to her sofa without asking permission. She watched him, uncertain. He said nothing more. Minutes passed, maybe more. Jasmine sat down too, Kaden still clinging to her. The baby whimpered, restless, his skin too hot. Sebastian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small bottle of water. "It's cool," he said finally. "May I?" Jasmine hesitated, then nodded. He poured a small amount into the cap and gently held it to the child's lips. Kaden drank. Not much, but enough. His breathing slowed. Sebastian remained crouched, his eyes never leaving the boy. He didn't reach for Jasmine. He didn't try to fix the conversation or spin it with logic. He simply stayed. His silence wasn't evasive. It was presence. He knew he couldn't rewind time. He couldn't erase the betrayal or the way the world had cornered her. But he could be there now. And sometimes staying was louder than any apology. Sebastian returned the next morning. There was no message, no warning, just the sound of measured footsteps outside Jasmine's apartment. She opened the door, expecting silence again, another apology wrapped in hesitation. Instead, he held a roll of thick papers. Plans, she realized, clutched in his hand. "I want to build a nursery wing," he said unceremoniously, as if it were a natural continuation of yesterday's silence. She blinked at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. "A nursery?" He came in, unrolling the papers on her small dining table, smoothing them with his palm. "For your boys," he said, then corrected himself. "For every child of anyone who works in my house. I can't change what happened last week. Hell, I can't change what happened to you or what I let happen. But I can change that house. I can change what it's like to walk through its doors." Jasmine looked at the lines and measurements, the notes scribbled in the margins in her neat handwriting. She didn't know what to say. Not yet. But her fingers reached for the edge of the paper as if she needed to confirm it was real. And it was. They sat at her table for over an hour, their coffee growing cold, the plants slowly wilting at the edges. At some point, Sebastian slid a blank grocery receipt across the table and pushed a pen toward her. "Help me design it," he said. "I'm good with code and hardware, but human warmth is your specialty." She laughed softly, not quite believing him, but she took the pen anyway. She drew a wide arched window, then a small bookcase underneath, and finally, instinctively, a rocking chair. He watched, then leaned over and began sketching beside her. Rough stars dotted the ceiling plan, crooked and sweet. "They glow in the dark," he explained, almost shyly. "Kids like that, right?" Jasmine nodded. "Kai is obsessed with the moon." Sebastian smiled. "Really?" He smiled. Not the polite executive expression he wore at investor dinners or in magazines, but something fuller, freer. "Then let's give him a moon on the ceiling," he said. His hand touched hers for a fraction of a second as he reached for the pen again. Neither of them pulled away. It was nothing, and yet it was nothing. The boys napped nearby on a wool blanket Jasmine had spread out, their little chests rising and falling in unison. Every now and then Kai would let out a sigh in his sleep, and Sebastian would pause almost reverently to look at him. He asked questions, real ones, about Kaden's favorite foods, Kai's first word, the lullaby Jasmine sang when they were tearful. And he listened, not with performative interest, but with the absorption of a man collecting missing pieces of a puzzle he didn't know he needed. "I used to think I'd be a terrible father," he admitted quietly. "I never had a role model, and I spent so much time focused on building things that I forgot people were what mattered." Jasmine didn't rush to reassure him. She didn't tell him he was wrong or try to ease his discomfort. She just said, "The fact that you're saying that kind of proves you be good at it." Sebastian looked at her then, really looked at her, and the moment held. It wasn't romantic, not yet. But it was honest. And honesty, for both of them, had become rarer than gold. As the afternoon wore on, their sketches became messier, more playful. Jasmine drew a soft corner filled with stuffed animals. Sebastian added cubicles labeled with names they made up. "What if this is too much?" she asked once, more to herself than to him. "What if people say we're crossing lines?" He leaned back, his expression softening but calm. "Let them talk," he said. "They talk anyway. I'd rather be judged for building something good than admired for standing still." The words hung in the air like something she hadn't realized she needed. Not a promise, not a confession, but a choice, a direction. She nodded slowly, a strand of hair falling into her eyes. Sebastian reached out to tuck it back without thinking, then froze. She didn't move. His hand fell to the table, and they both looked down again, not embarrassed, but a little breathless. This thing between them, undefined, unnamed, was growing faster than either had expected. 3 months later, the nursery wing was finished, and it didn't look like something born of architectural blueprints or contractor meetings. It looked lived in before a single child had ever stepped inside. Walls painted in soft, playful colors, shelves stocked with worn storybooks from secondhand stores, not catalogs. A rocking chair that Jasmine had picked up at a yard sale and restored herself. And stars on the ceiling that Sebastian had cut and glued by hand while the twins napped in a makeshift playpen beside him. What had once been a sterile hallway filled with portraits of Sebastian's ancestors had been transformed into a wing buzzing with color, memory, and presence. The transition did not come with fanfare. It was quiet, gradual, like the first breath after pain, like light through drawn curtains. The boys ran down the hallway in mismatched socks, leaving trails of toys and laughter that no one asked them to pick up. Sebastian found himself stepping on Legos and not caring. Jasmine found herself smiling without fear of what the next moment might demand. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation, had begun to feel like what neither of them had dared to name, a home. That night, as the city of Los Angeles sparkled through the windows, Sebastian and Jasmine sat in the new playroom, watching Kai and Kaden sleep peacefully under the stars that shone in the darkness they had glued together. "Do you know what the most amazing thing about this whole journey is?" Jasmine said, adjusting Kaden's blanket. "What?" "It all started because you saw 2 children playing on your marble floor and didn't kick them out. You let them stay." Sebastian leaned over and kissed her forehead softly. "And you let me stay too." The house, once frozen in time, now pulsed with it. Not just because children ran through its hallways or because paint had been refreshed or furniture moved, but because trust had been built slowly, painfully, honestly. The kind of trust that makes a place sacred. And then the house breathed, and everyone in it finally felt alive. On the walls of the nursery wing, Sebastian had framed a simple phrase Jasmine had written on that first grocery receipt: "Home is what you build, not what you inherit." And every morning, when the twins woke up and ran barefoot through the hallways that once echoed only with silence, Sebastian knew they had built something more precious than any empire, a family.